Man, Star Trek is f***ing cool. Oh, I can't say that on YouTube, can I? Well, that's my sheer f***ing hubris, I guess. Hello interwebs and welcome to my ongoing retro review series of Star Trek Discovery Season 1 being done in preparation for Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season premiere later this year. Today we're going to be looking at the 5th episode of the series, Choose Your Pain, or as I like to call it, the episode where Star Trek gets gay. Okay, gayer.
I'm so glad to have made such an interesting new friend today.
Okay, more overtly gay. Look, despite Rick Berman's Star Trek has always been gay as f***, so just deal with it, alright? Or, you know, revel in it like I do. Choose Your Pain is the first episode of the series not to give the main focus to Burnham. While she remains a critical driving force of the episode, it's actually Saru and Lorca who take center stage, or in Saru's case, the center seat. One of the joys that I've been having looking back at early Discovery is seeing how much my memory has been clouded by Discovery's reputation over the years, especially in its early seasons, because as much as everyone talks about Burnham always being the center of attention or the character arcs being non-existent in Discovery, it's so cool to go back and just find how much that really isn't the case. Truly, I want to underscore this here. This episode in particular is a complex work of interweaving character arcs, themes, and storylines that are all setting up stuff that's coming later down the road, while also working in and of itself within this episode. Unlike the confident sage and wise post-Vahari Saru that we know from Season 4 of Discovery, Saru in this episode is anxious and unsure of himself, especially as he deals not only with his tension with Burnham, but also takes command of Discovery when Lorca is captured by Klingons.
There is an element aboard this ship that causes me to second-guess myself. That cannot continue. I must remain clear-headed.
Throughout this episode, we see Saru struggling to find his identity as a leader, especially as someone who never got a strong moral commander like Georgiou to mentor him as Burnham did. Something left unsaid until the episode's final moments.
You stood by her side and learned everything she had to teach. The anticipated scenario, you would move up and out. Captain your own starship. And I would take your place. I never got that chance.
Instead, at the start of this episode, he is left trying to figure it out on his own, and as such, relies on computer algorithms.
List Starfleet's most decorated captains, living and deceased.
Working.
Based on their service records, is it possible to identify the qualities most essential to their success?
Be careful, Saru, that's how you end up with Jordan Peterson. We also get an Archer and Pike reference here, which not only makes my Star Trek Enterprise fangirl heart squeal, but also is a nice future setup for Anson Mount's Pike coming next season. Though as much as I love him, I would question anyone taking leadership advice from my favorite himbo Captain Archer.
Nice! Goal!
But without a guiding star, Saru doubles down on letting his fear and trauma guide his leadership. Saru's been constantly primed by his upbringing, biology, Lorca's fascistic leadership style, Saru's own lack of mentorship, and the ongoing war to view his command as an adversarial role to those that he is in charge of, causing him to have antagonistic confrontations with his crew rather than inviting discussions as Georgiou or even later Captain Pike would do.
I didn't sit out the war with my crew just to stand down now. Listen, I don't mind dissenting opinions, I really don't, but they have to come with solutions.
We see this quite clearly in scenes that he has with Stamets and Culber.
I do not enjoy being in this position, but I have 134 souls to protect today. Be ready to force the creature to comply.
I will not be party to murder.
Doctor, I was not talking to you. Do you understand my orders, and can I count on you to follow them, Lieutenant Stamets?
Yet this is most borne out with his main source of tension, Burnham, who, building off of the last episode, begins to argue for the rights of Ripper as a living being potentially being harmed by the spore drive.
In the last 48 hours, it seems sluggish, depressed.
We don't know if it experiences stress or pain like we do.
You think I'm anthropomorphizing?
We see here in this episode that not only is Lorca, Discovery, and Saru viewing Ripper as a resource to be used, but also Starfleet itself.
We need more tardigrades to ensure safe, accurate navigation.
This leads to a true Star Trekian setup, with someone, in this case Burnham, arguing for the basic rights of someone else that the system and those in leadership do not see. The only difference here being is that it's our captain and Saru arguing to dehumanize Ripper, not some random admiral or asshole scientist like with Data in The Next Generation, for example.
I was told it's virtually indestructible.
I disagree with that assessment.
Do you have proof that we are harming it?
Not as of yet.
I am not finding this information to be helpful in any way.
I also love that the arguments for Ripper's rights are not contingent on him being sentient, but rather that he is worthy of respect simply for him being alive.
We need to find a workaround. Making Ripper the critical component for the S-Drive is unsustainable. For the creature and your invention.
We could lose them both.
This is something that other Star Treks often got wrong, arguing that creatures only deserve rights if they reach a certain bar of intelligence.
Prove to the court that I am sentient.
This is absurd. We all know you're sentient.
So I am sentient, but Commander Data is not.
That's right.
Why?
Which I think is frustrating because if you actually look at a lot of arguments for animal ethics and rights, it isn't necessarily contingent on animals being sentient beings, and in fact shouldn't be. We should view all life as valuable by it being life. Burnham not only argues with Saru, but Stamets overseeing Ripper as being worthy of respect, bringing in Culber for his time to shine. I love the arguments between the three of them here, showcasing the drastically different but still scientific perspectives, be it medical, anthropological, or astromycological? Whatever the hell Stamets is, the space fungus science. Yet through the science, you can tell that they still have personal disagreements and viewpoints.
To be clear, the tardigrade was your contribution. I never intended to utilize a living creature as a navigation tool.
I didn't either.
You say portabella, I say portabello.
Showcasing that science isn't necessarily an unbiased thing, but always based on the perspective of the scientists, their own biases, and their own field of study. This also extends to Saru, who worries more about saving his captain, Lorca, so that he doesn't lose her like he did Giorgio, his own main source of trauma, leading him to dehumanize Stamets and Culber and Burnham in the argument.
This is an extreme reaction to adverse conditions. The tardigrade is in survival mode.
So are we, Doctor. Crack it open if you have to.
In my opinion, that will kill it.
As it is our only way to get out of Klingon space, it is a risk we must take.
Building upon her anthropomorphizing, though, Burnham clearly sees Ripper as a metaphor for herself, as she clearly hints when she argues with Saru.
I don't know how much more the tardigrade can sustain. The more you hurt someone, the less helpful they become.
This then ties into the season-long theme of trauma and healing during fascism and war. As Saru learns to see Ripper's humanity this episode, so too does he learn to stop viewing Burnham as an enemy and have empathy for her trauma, even as he expresses how she hurt him.
Are you really afraid of me?
I am not. I am angry at you. Angry because of how much you stole from me. I am deeply jealous that I never got the chance you had.
Mutual healing out of being open and vulnerable. We love to see it. Very Star Trek. Rewatching this season, I just continually find it how it's such bullshit that people said that this show didn't get Star Trek. Yes, it's darker, but it's so clear that this series isn't just being dark for darkness' sake as part of a stylistic peak TV trend, but aiming to use a darker setting to really interrogate how Star Trek's values can hold up in a universe being pulled along by fascists. That we can only beat fascism and ultimately heal by valuing empathy, connection, and trust even through our traumas. A still necessary message today. It's also why when people say, "Ooh, Star Trek Discovery is too much about feelings," it showcases to me that they clearly missed the point of Star Trek. That logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. Speaking of, this brings us to Lorca's storyline. The episode starts off showcasing Lorca fighting for moral battle time with Starfleet, casually hinting at his true mirror universe motives for wanting to use the Spore Drive. We also get the beginnings of his relationship with Admiral Cornwell, and mentions of the loss of Prime Lorca's former ship at the start of the war, seeding his backstory, and giving us a potential traumatic moment in his past to draw from for the themes of this episode, even if we ultimately learn that that specific trauma is not what Lorca is drawing from. Yet the episode truly thrives once Lorca is captured by the Klingons, meeting Ash Tyler and Harcortt Fenton Mudd. Mudd is a really interesting pull for this dark wartime setting Star Trek series to pull from, given that the original Mudd was a campy, over-the-top character from the original series.
A pretty face doesn't affect you at all, does it? That is, not unless you want it to. You can save it, girls. This type can turn himself off from any emotion.
The dude did a lot of women's sex trafficking. Gotta love 1960s Star Trek.
I apologize for what he said, sir. He's so used to buying and selling people.
I'll handle the conversation, darling.
Yet weirdly, he works in Discovery. Rainn Wilson manages to give traces of Roger Carmel's theatrical performance while still making the character his own, fitting this more grounded style.
The only crime I'm guilty of is loving too much. It's true, Captain.
He also manages to bring up themes of Starfleet's elitism, giving voice to that very Deep Space Nine-esque theme of sometimes the Federation being pretentious with its values.
Have you ever bothered to look out of your spaceships down at the little guys below? If you had, you'd realize that there's a lot more of us down there than there are you up here.
On top of that, Mary Chiefos L'Rell is having oh so much fun playing the torturer here. Ash Tyler sadly is less memorable, though Shazad Latif is really trying to humanize his performance, despite the lack of depthful character writing for him. This episode showcases Ash probably at his best, as he quickly bonds with Lorca as a Starfleet soldier, though there are some nice hints to his later reveal that I missed here on initial watch.
You were at the Battle of the Binaries?
They gave it a name.
That said, because the character is meant as a mystery box for the season later on, he still comes across as a bit of a wet blanket, a problem that only gets exacerbated over time. Lorca, another mystery box character, is done much better, as we see his intelligence and ability to gain power in a situation where he seems to be on the back foot, manipulating Mudd and L'Rell.
You played me. Oh.
Speaking on themes though, the idea that Klingons let prisoners choose their pain, letting the prisoners choose who the Klingons beat up in order to cause the prisoners to fail to bond with each other, is not only dark, but also fits the theme of this episode. Like Saru not being able to bond with Burnham due to both of their traumas inflicted upon them by the Klingons in the war, so too do the Klingons here prevent their prisoners bonding by forcing them to traumatize each other. Here's where the show begins to play the long game though, by showcasing Lorca's callous approach, calling upon Ash Tyler's training as a soldier, not a colleague, helps lead them to escape. This, seemingly, is the series displaying Lorca's militaristic viewpoint as correct, as he clearly evokes his trauma as a source of his strength.
Public death. It's a Klingon way to spread terror. Not my crew. Not on my watch.
Yet his vindictive choice to leave Mudd in the hands of the Klingons is incredibly dark, foreshadowing that Lorca's viewpoint is not only anti-Starfleet, but just plain wrong.
You can't walk away from me, Lorca! I'm coming for you! You hear? You haven't seen the last of Harcortt, Fenton, Mudd!
However, this only really works in hindsight, once we know who Lorca actually is at the end of the season. So I can understand why some people may have balked at Lorca's callousness on their first watch of this episode, believing that it was Star Trek Discovery showcasing a captain we're supposed to like making a terrible choice, and thus potentially empathizing with a fascistic viewpoint. But in a rewatch, it works very well as a nice setup for down the road.
You choose your own pain. Mine helps me remember.
Speaking of payoffs though, Stamets ultimately chooses to genetically augment himself and nearly dies to save Ripper after Ripper has a dramatic trauma response to his torture. This is such an excellent payoff for Stamets' character, who has mostly been a crotchety asshole to this point in the series, showcasing that he does have a heart underneath it all. And that his callousness is just a way to protect himself from people like Lorca and who he thinks Burnham is.
I am swallowing the urge to set the record straight.
That won't get us anywhere. Do you want to be right, or do you want to fix this?
Again, showcasing the themes of how trauma sometimes closes us off, and our way through that is to make ourselves vulnerable. This also ties into the wonderful scene with him and Culber brushing their teeth together, revealing that they are in fact a married couple. It's so nice to see this moment of quiet domesticity be the reveal for the first regular gay characters on Star Trek. It's a type of moment that most gay characters don't really get, especially in science fiction. That said, did it have to come with them putting phallic objects in their mouth? Seriously though, it's a sweet scene, and I love that it comes after we showcasing them having arguments as professionals in the workplace, showcasing that being gay and in a relationship doesn't have to affect professionalism. Hear that, Star Trek Picard Season 3? Seven and Raffi could have stayed together! But jokes aside, this was a really big moment for Star Trek as a franchise to really push forward its inclusiveness of LGBTQ people, something that Gene Roddenberry had been trying to do since Star Trek The Next Generation back in the 90s. It's so beautiful, if sadly tainted by later choices in Season 1. A few other random notes though. I haven't commented on it a ton, but Tilly and Burnham are really lovely. Their friendship in early season 1 is adorable and especially humanizing for Burnham, who is otherwise only in antagonistic relationships on the show. And Wiseman's autistically coded performance is great, and I'm really sad she gets flanderized in season 2 because she's so good here, where it's much more subtle with her slightly strange vocal cadence and eyeline choices that she makes.
It's me. Well, since that is very rarely the case in my case, I would love to hear how it's not me.
Also, the show has a lot more mirror universe foreshadowing than I remember, with doubles and mirrors appearing constantly in the visuals. Also, as I joked about before, this is the episode where Star Trek used the F-bomb for the first time, and oh boy did people get upset.
This is so fucking cool.
And yes, is it a gratuitous moment that is just the show going, oh look, we're on streaming, we can swear now? Yes, absolutely. Do I care? No. I think swearing is a perfectly fucking normal part of speech, and for that moment to be centered on excitement for science? I mean, what could be more Star Trek?
Look at that. It is fucking cool.
Overall, yet again, this is another fantastic episode of Discovery. It brings in more direct Star Trek references like Harry Mudd that feel more natural than the shoehorned Sarek and Spock ones that we've gotten so far. Also, it handles the introduction of regular queer characters to Star Trek in a beautiful way. But the real highlight continues to be the show's ability to interweave complex themes of trauma, fascism, leadership, and empathy into the nuanced character arcs that still tells a great episodic story while having its eye firmly on its season-long arc. The episodes focus on choosing your pain, or in other words, choosing how you interact with the world when handling your trauma, is excellently woven throughout Burnham, Lorca's, and Saru's arcs. I'm really curious to see where this series is going to begin to falter, as I remember ultimately doing, because so far, this rewatch has reaffirmed my belief in the strength of Discovery, even during its supposedly rocky first season. That's my review for Choose Your Pain, the 5th episode of Star Trek Discovery's first season, but what did you think about this episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to subscribe to my main channel as well, and beyond all of that, I hope you, my friends, live long and prosper.